She called me a guest in the house I built with my own 2 hands. My son just watched. They thought the old man was finished, broken. They were about to learn that eviction works both ways. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Let me back up and tell you how a simple room became a battlefield. I was in my study. The afternoon sun warmed the mahogany desk I'd owned for 40 years. I was reviewing proposals, real estate development. My world. I built an empire from dust. I thought I built a family too. The silence in the study used to be peaceful. Now, it felt brittle, thin, like the calm before a storm. And the storm was approaching fast. The door burst open. No knock. She never knocked anymore. Chloe, my daughter-in-law, stood there, hands on her hips, a storm cloud in designer jeans. Her eyes were sharp, calculating. My son, Ethan, hovered behind her. He was looking at his shoes. He always looked at his shoes when Chloe was angry. It was a habit that infuriated me, a sign of weakness. "Robert, we need to talk," Chloe announced. It wasn't a request. It was a declaration of war. I slowly placed my pen down. I knew a hostile takeover when I saw one. "About what, Chloe?" I kept my voice calm. "Neutral. The house," she said, stepping further into my space. Her perfume was overpowering, specifically the master suite. My stomach tightened. The master suite, the room I'd shared with Sarah, my wife, for 3 decades. The room where she took her last breath. It wasn't just a room. It was a memory vault. The heart of the house, and Chloe wanted to carve it out. "What about the master suite?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "It's ridiculous," Chloe scoffed, flicking her hair over her shoulder. "My parents are moving in next week. They cannot be expected to sleep in that tiny guest room downstairs." The guest room was 400 square feet, hardly tiny. Ethan finally looked up, his eyes pleading. "Dad, she's right. The guest room is small. It's dark." He was already siding with her. The betrayal stung, but it didn't surprise me. "Her parents need space," Chloe cut in. "They need the light. They need the attached bathroom. It's the only practical solution." Practical, a word they used when they wanted something that belonged to me. I leaned back in my leather chair. The silence stretched out, thin and brittle. "And where?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. "Do you suggest I sleep?" I expected hesitation, maybe a flicker of guilt. I was wrong. Chloe didn't hesitate. She had this all planned out. "You take the guest room. It's perfectly fine for one person. One person." A subtle reminder that I was alone now, that Sarah was gone. "Honestly, Robert," she continued, her tone dripping with impatience, "you rattle around this huge house anyway. It's wasted on you. Wasted on me. The house I built. The house I paid for." But that wasn't the worst part. Chloe's voice hardened. "We need a decision, Robert. Either you give your room to my parents, or you pack your things and find somewhere else." There it was. The ultimatum. The naked threat. Ethan flinched. "Chloe, maybe we can—" "No, Ethan," she snapped. "We are a family. Robert needs to start acting like it. This is our home now." "Our home." I looked at my son. The boy I raised, the man I handed a career to. I waited for him to defend me, to defend his mother's memory. He said nothing. He just nodded, slowly. That nod broke something inside me. The silence that followed was deafening. I didn't give them an answer. I simply picked up my pen and returned to my paperwork. "Fine. Be stubborn," Chloe spat. "But my parents arrive on Friday. You have until then." They retreated. The door slammed shut behind them. The study was quiet again, but the peace was gone. The war had begun, and I realized I had underestimated the enemy. They weren't just greedy, they were ruthless. The next afternoon, I sought refuge in the past. I was in the master bedroom closet, a large walk-in, one Sarah had loved. I was organizing some of her old letters, the scent of her perfume still clinging faintly to the air. I heard voices approaching, cheerful, loud. They didn't belong here. The bedroom door swung open, no knock, no pause. "This is it," Chloe announced brightly. I stepped deeper into the closet, hidden slightly by the door. I watched the invasion unfold. 2 strangers stood in the center of my room, a man with a booming laugh and a woman with critical eyes. The Davises, Chloe's parents. They were 4 days early. A calculated move. A show of force. They didn't see me. Or maybe they chose not to. "Look at the light, Mama." Chloe gestured to the large bay windows. The windows Sarah and I had picked out together so she could watch the sunrise. And the space. We'll put your antique dresser right here. She pointed to the wall where my wedding photo hung. They were already redesigning my life. Mrs. Davis walked over to my bed. She ran a hand over the bedspread. A quilt Sarah had made by hand. "It's lovely, dear," she sniffed. "Very spacious." Then she delivered the cut, the casual cruelty that takes years to perfect. "Does he keep it clean? He?" She spoke about me in the third person while I was standing 5 feet away. I felt a cold knot forming in my chest. I was being treated like a piece of inconvenient furniture. Mr. Davis clapped his hands together. "Excellent lighting for my painting. I can set up my easel by the window." They were moving in, mentally erasing me. But the real gut punch was yet to come. Ethan walked in then. He was carrying a measuring tape. My heart sank. He walked over to the wall near the closet door. He extended the tape, his movements brisk and efficient. "We can definitely fit the king size in here, no problem," he said, sounding more animated than I'd heard him in months. He marked the spot with a pencil, a small gray scar on the pale blue paint. He was measuring the space I occupied, calculating how quickly they could replace me. I stood there, holding the box of Sarah's letters, feeling like a ghost haunting his own life. I had to get out of there before I exploded. "Excuse me," I said, my voice tight. They all turned, startled, as if the walls had suddenly spoken. "Oh, Robert," Chloe said, her smile strained and artificial. "We didn't see you there." Lies. She always smiled like that when she lied. "We were just getting some ideas," she continued brightly. "You don't mind, do you? You don't mind, do you?" The audacity was breathtaking. They were standing in my bedroom, planning my eviction and asking if I minded. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just walked past them. I felt their eyes on my back. Judgmental, dismissive. I went down the hall to my study and closed the door with a soft, definitive click. I sat at my desk, my hands trembling slightly. It wasn't the demand for the room that hurt the most. It was the cold, calculated dismissal of my existence. They weren't just moving in, they were taking over, and they were doing it with a smile. The real battle was just beginning, and I was fighting alone. The pressure mounted over the next few days. It wasn't a frontal assault, it was a siege. A series of small, sharp cuts, designed to bleed me out. Chloe wasn't waiting for my official surrender. She was already claiming victory, and she was enjoying every minute of it. It started at breakfast the next morning. I came downstairs at 7 a.m., as I had every day for 30 years. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen, but something was wrong. The atmosphere was different. Tunts, my usual seat at the head of the table, was occupied. Mr. Davis sat there reading the newspaper, loudly complaining about the Wi-Fi speed. My table, my Wi-Fi. Chloe was bustling around the kitchen. She saw me standing there, surprised. "Oh, good morning, Robert," she said too cheerfully. She pointed to the side of the table. A place was set there, squeezed between the wall and the buffet cabinet. The seat we used for unexpected guests. The servant's seat. I stared at the cramped space. The disrespect was blatant, deliberate. "We're rearranging things to be more communal," she explained, her tone sickeningly sweet. "It's better for conversation this way." Communal, it felt like a demotion, a public humiliation. I looked at the head of the table. Mr. Davis didn't even look up from his paper. Ethan was sitting next to him, scrolling on his phone. He didn't look at me either. I didn't sit down. I wouldn't be squeezed into a corner, not in my own house. I poured myself a cup of coffee and drank it, standing in the kitchen. The message was clear. I was no longer the head of this household. I was just there, and they were making sure I knew it. But they weren't done yet. Not by a long shot. Later that day, I went to the living room to read. The afternoon sun usually hit my favorite spot perfectly. I needed a moment of peace. A sense of normalcy. I stopped in the doorway. The room felt different. Wrong. Colder. My leather armchair was gone. The chair I'd had for 20 years. Perfectly broken in. The chair where I read to Ethan when he was a boy. the chair where I sat when I couldn't sleep after Sarah died. In its place was a hideous, floral print chaise lounge. Mrs. Davis was already sitting on it, filing her nails. My blood pressure spiked. The theft felt personal, vicious. I marched out to the garage. I found Ethan attempting to hang a bicycle. He fumbled with the hook when he saw the look on my face. "Where is my chair, Ethan?" I demanded. My voice was low, dangerous. He flinched. He adjusted his glasses nervously. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Dad, listen." Chloe thought. "Where is it?" I repeated, cutting him off. "She donated it," he whispered, staring at the concrete floor. "Donated it, without asking. Stolen. She said it was too dark." "Dad," Ethan rushed to explain. "It didn't fit the new aesthetic." "The new aesthetic?" "Erasing every trace of me. Erasing Sarah. Besides," Ethan added weakly, trying to sound reasonable, "Mrs. Davis needed a place to rest her legs. The chaise is better for her circulation." I stared at my son. He was defending her, justifying the theft of my comfort, my memories. His betrayal was so casual, so effortless. He had chosen his side, and it wasn't mine. I turned and walked away. I couldn't trust myself to speak. I felt a tremor in my hands. Anger, a deep, cold anger I hadn't felt in years. They thought they were winning. They thought they were breaking me down. They were just pushing me closer to the edge, and the edge was sharper than they realized. The final straw came that evening. I was working late in my study. It was the only room left that felt like mine, the only space they hadn't invaded. I heard a commotion downstairs. Loud voices, the sound of power tools, hammering, drilling. What were they destroying now? I walked out to the hallway and looked down over the banister. The scene below stopped me cold. Chloe was directing two workmen. They were drilling into the beautiful oak staircase Sarah and I had commissioned, the staircase we had walked down on Ethan's wedding day. They were installing a stair lift, a motorized chair on an ugly metal track. "What is going on?" I demanded, my voice booming through the entryway. The workmen stopped drilling. Chloe looked up, feigning surprise. "Oh, good, you're awake," she said, brushing dust off her hands. "It's for Mama. She has trouble with stairs." It was a lie. Mrs. Davis played tennis 3 times a week. She didn't have trouble with stairs. The stair lift was an eyesore, a permanent scar on the home I loved, but it was her next words that truly gutted me. She paused, then added with that sickeningly sweet smile, "You might find it useful too, Robert." She looked me straight in the eye. "After all, you're not getting any younger." It was a deliberate, pointed attack, a reminder that they saw me as obsolete, frail, dependent. I gripped the banister, my knuckles white. The sheer cruelty of it stole my breath. They were dismantling my home, piece by piece, right in front of me. And they were enjoying it. They weren't just dismantling my home. They were dismantling me. I realized then that this wasn't just about greed. It was about power. And they wouldn't stop until they had all of it. The first major betrayal, the undeniable rupture, occurred the next morning, the moment when I knew things could not continue. I woke up early. The house felt heavy, suffocating. The silence pressed down on me. I walked into the master bathroom to shower. I needed the hot water to wash away the feeling of their contempt. I stopped dead in the doorway. The vanity was completely cleared out. My razor, my shaving cream, my toothbrush, the cologne Sarah always bought me, all gone. Every trace of me vanished. In their place was an elaborate array of perfumes, makeup, and a pink silk toiletry bag. Mrs. Davis's things. They hadn't even waited for me to move out. They had colonized my space, claimed the territory. My heart hammered in my chest. A cold fury washed over me. This was a violation, a deliberate act of disrespect. I walked back into the bedroom. Chloe was standing there, holding a stack of my sweaters. She was humming. She looked up, startled. She hadn't expected me to be awake. "Good morning, Robert," she said briskly, recovering quickly, as if I were the hired help. "Where are my things?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. "We need to clear this space out today," she said, ignoring my question. Mama and Papa need to settle in. She tossed my sweaters onto a chair. She finally turned to me, her eyes cold and hard. I've put your bathroom things in the hall closet downstairs. You can use the powder room until you move into the guest suite. The powder room, a tiny half bath near the kitchen, barely big enough to turn around in. No shower. She wanted me to wash at the kitchen sink, like a servant. I haven't agreed to move, Chloe, I said, the words grinding out between clenched teeth. She sighed, exasperated, as if dealing with a difficult child. Robert, don't be obtuse. The decision has been made. Made by whom? I demanded. By us, she said coldly. Ethan and I run this household now. She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You've had it easy for too long, Robert. Living here, rent-free, while we struggle. Struggle? I stared at her, incredulous. Ethan made a 6-figure salary at my firm, a position I had handed him. I paid for this house, the utilities, the cars they drove. You don't know the meaning of the word, I said. We struggle with you, she spat, her mask slipping completely. The polite veneer vanished, revealing the ugliness underneath. Your moods, your silence, your constant judgment. This is our time now. Our time, as if my time was over. My parents deserve comfort, she continued, her voice rising. And frankly, so do we. Then she delivered the final blow, the words that shattered everything. You are a guest here now, Robert. Act like it, or leave. She picked up the sweaters she had tossed onto the chair and threw them onto the floor at my feet. A deliberate act of contempt. She turned on her heel and walked out, leaving me standing in the ruins of my life. The door closed behind her. The silence in the room was deafening. I looked at the sweaters piled on the hardwood floor. Sarah had knitted the top one for me, a deep blue cable knit. I bent down and picked them up, the wool feeling rough against my skin. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. They didn't just want the room, they wanted me gone. The house I had built with love and hard work was no longer a home. It was just property, and I was the tenant they were evicting. I retreated to my study, the last bastion of my shrinking world. I sat at my desk, the polished mahogany cool beneath my fingertips. I felt a profound exhaustion seep into my bones. I was tired of fighting, tired of justifying my existence. I was ready to give up. I looked around the study. My eyes landed on a small, silver frame on the bookshelf, a picture of Sarah and me. The day we broke ground on this house. It's not just wood and stone, Robert, Sarah had whispered that night. It's a container for love. The container was broken. The love had curdled. The memory tightened my throat. But it also cleared my mind. The exhaustion receded, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I wouldn't let them break me. I wouldn't crawl into the guest room and wait to die. But I realized something else, something darker. Their aggression felt too rushed, too desperate. They weren't just being cruel, they were hiding something. I had built an empire by reading the fine print, by understanding leverage. I knew that Endrin was power and I needed information. Why the urgency, why the sudden, aggressive takeover? It felt too coordinated, too ruthless. I went to the safe, hidden behind the bookshelf in my study. I kept copies of all essential documents there. The deed to the house, the family trust, financial statements. It was time to audit my life. I pulled out the folder related to the house. It was in my name, of course. Owned outright, Ethan would inherit it upon my death, but I retained full control during my lifetime. They couldn't evict me, legally, so why were they acting like they held all the cards? I sifted through the papers, tax records, insurance policies, blueprints, and then I found it. Tucked in the back of the folder, something new. A recent application for a home equity line of credit. A hulk, my stomach dropped. It was dated 2 weeks ago, before the confrontation about the master suite. They were trying to borrow $200,000 against the house. My house. They needed money. That explained the urgency. But they couldn't borrow against the house without my approval, without my signature. I flipped to the last page of the application. My signature was there, Robert Harrison, but it wasn't my handwriting. It was a forgery. A clumsy one. Ethan's handwriting, trying to look like mine. I stared at the document, the betrayal cutting deeper than I thought possible, deeper than the insults, deeper than the donated chair. They weren't just entitled. They were criminals. My own son, a thief. They were trying to steal the equity, to drain the assets before I was even gone. Everything suddenly made sense. Chloe's urgency, the arrival of her parents. It wasn't just about comfort, it was about control. It wasn't just about comfort, it was about control, a desperate attempt to stabilize their finances. They wanted me diminished, confused, maybe even legally incompetent, so they could take everything. The revelation redefined everything. Their petty insults and power plays weren't just cruelty. They were a strategy, a hostile takeover. I thought they were just cruel. I didn't realize they were also desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. This forgery was their biggest mistake. But I needed to know how deep the rot went. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. Mark Thompson, my lawyer, my oldest friend, the sharpest legal mind I knew. He answered on the second ring. Robert, everything all right? You sound different. Mark, I said, my voice steady. I need you to do something for me. Quietly, I have a situation here. I told him about the forgery. I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. While Mark started organizing my defense, I needed more information. I needed to understand the scope of their desperation. I called Maria. She had been our housekeeper for 20 years. Loyal, discreet, and deeply fond of Sarah. Chloe had fired her 2 months ago, claiming they needed to cut costs. If this story is keeping you hooked, drop a like. It was time to find out what Maria knew. We met at a small coffee shop across town. Maria looked worried. What is wrong, Mr. Robert? She asked, stirring her tea. Maria, I started slowly. When Chloe let you go, did you notice anything unusual? Anything about their spending? Maria hesitated. She looked down at her hands. She told me not to say anything, but I owe you and Mrs. Sarah everything. She leaned closer. They are drowning, Mr. Robert, drowning in debt. Maria painted a grim picture. Chloe had massive credit card debt, hidden accounts, shopping sprees in the city, expensive jewelry, designer clothes. She was desperate, Maria said. She kept saying the house was the answer. That they needed the money before the end of the month. The hilak wasn't for home improvements. It was to cover her tracks. I thanked Maria. I slipped an envelope across the table. Severance pay Chloe had refused to give her. I walked out of the coffee shop. The truth was ugly, but it was also clarifying. I knew what they had done. I knew why they did it. Now I needed to know how they did it. I drove to the bank. I needed to meet the third new player in this drama. Mr. Henderson, the bank manager. A nervous man, detail-oriented. He always wore a bow tie. He saw me and immediately ushered me into his office. Mr. Harrison, he said, closing the door. A pleasure to see you. How can I help you? I'm reviewing my accounts, Mr. Henderson, I said, sitting down. I noticed an application for a halak on my property. Mr. Henderson went pale. His bow tie seemed to tighten. Yes, he stammered. We received the application, but it's currently under review. Why? I pressed. My credit is impeccable. The house is owned outright. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. There were some irregularities. He opened a file on his desk. We require an in-person verification for lines of credit over 100,000. We called the house to schedule it. And? I asked. Your son, Ethan, answered, Mr. Henderson said. He said you were unavailable, that you were indisposed. He offered to verify the information himself, but you didn't let him, I stated. No, Mr. Harrison. Policy dictates the primary account holder must verify. Mr. Henderson paused. Then we received a call from someone claiming to be you, asking to expedite the application. Ethan, he had tried to impersonate me. He was clumsier than I thought. The voice is similar, Mr. Henderson continued, but the caller failed the security verification questions. We flagged the account immediately. We suspected potential fraud. I leaned back in my chair. They were desperate and stupid. Thank you, Mr. Henderson, I said, standing up. I appreciate your diligence. Please cancel the application immediately and notify me of any future activity on my accounts. Of course, Mr. Harrison. I walked out of the bank. I had them. I had everything I needed. The motive, the means, the proof. Now it was time to take back what was mine. The transformation began immediately. The shock of the forgery, the depth of their deception, galvanized me. I was no longer the grieving father, the victim of their petty insults. I was the CEO protecting his assets. I called Mark from the car. Mark, I have a plan. I need you to mobilize. What do you need? Mark asked, shifting into lawyer mode. First, the Peterson place, I said. My eyes fixed on the large Victorian across the street from my house. It was empty, neglected. Perfect. I know they're in financial distress, looking for a quick sale. Make the offer. Above asking, cash, contingent on a 48-hour close. Mark whistled. That's aggressive, Robert. Are you sure? It needs work. I don't care about the work. I care about the location. I wanted a front row seat to their downfall. Consider it done, Mark said. What else? I need you to contact Detective Miller at the precinct. The fourth new character in this drama, a man known for his thoroughness. Tell him I discovered a potential fraud regarding my property. I instructed. I want him to open a file. No arrests yet. Just an inquiry, a quiet visit to the house. A shot across the bow, Mark said, understanding immediately. Exactly, I said. And one more thing. I need you to call George Vance at my office. George Vance, a senior executive. Ambitious, ruthless, and he despised Ethan. I want Ethan transferred out of his current position, I said. Effective immediately. Put him in the satellite office. Commission-based sales, under George's direct supervision. Mark chuckled, darkly. That's cruel, Robert. It's practical, I replied, using Ethan's own word against him. I hung up the phone. The plan was in motion. The counterattack had begun. Now it was time to pack. Not for the guest room, but for a new beginning. I worked with quiet efficiency, methodical, focused. I went to my study first. I selected only the things that mattered. My essential documents. The photo of Sarah. My leather-bound collection of architectural digests. I called a moving company, a reputable one. I arranged for them to come the next morning. The house was strangely quiet. The calm before the final storm. I went upstairs. I walked into the master bedroom. Chloe had already started moving my clothes out. Piles of shirts and trousers were stacked on the floor. I started packing my suitcases. Calmly. As I was closing the last suitcase, Chloe appeared in the doorway. She saw the suitcases and froze. A triumphant smirk played on her lips. She thought I was finally capitulating, moving to the guest room. I'm glad you're finally seeing sense, Robert, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. I had the guest room cleaned. It's small, but it'll... She walked into the room, inspecting the space. Try not to leave a mess when you move your things down there. Then came the final insult. The one that confirmed I was doing the right thing. And the floor gets very cold, she added. So don't forget your slippers. Slippers, she saw me as an invalid. A doddering old fool. She was enjoying this. Savoring the humiliation she thought she was inflicting. I said nothing. I just watched her. Then her eyes scanned the room, taking inventory. Looking for spoils. They landed on the antique mantel clock on the dresser, a beautiful piece, brass and mahogany. A gift from Sarah on our 10th anniversary. It was one of the few things I planned to take with me. Chloe walked over and picked it up. She tested its weight. No respect for its history, only its value. This is lovely, she mused. It's wasted on you. Wasted. That word again. She turned to me. I think it will look much better in my parents' new sitting area. A nice welcome gift. She didn't ask. She just took it. It was an act of unnecessary cruelty, a deliberate violation of my memories, designed to show me just how powerless I was. I watched her walk away, the clock cradled in her arms. She thought she had taken my memories. She didn't realize she had just taken a piece of wood and metal. The real value was in the man who owned it, and that man was leaving. The next morning, the sound of a large engine idling outside broke the quiet. 8 a.m. sharp, I stood by the window in the dining room, coffee in hand. I watched as a large moving truck backed into the driveway. The timing was perfect. The sound was loud, deliberately so. Ethan, still in his pajamas, rushed into the room. His eyes were wide with confusion. His hair was mussed. "What's going on?" he asked, looking from the truck to me. "Did you order something?" He still didn't get it. He thought the world revolved around him. Chloe appeared behind him, tying her silk robe. Her face was tight with annoyance. "Who is that?" she demanded. "If it's another delivery for my parents, they need to use the side entrance. They're blocking the driveway." They were about to find out just how blocked the driveway was. I didn't answer. I just waited. The anticipation was delicious. The doorbell rang, a sharp, insistent sound. Chloe, huffing in annoyance, went to answer it. I heard voices in the foyer. "There must be some mistake," Chloe said sharply. "We're moving things within the house, not out of it." "No mistake, ma'am," the foreman said, his voice deep and professional. "Order is for Robert Harrison. We're here to move the items marked in the study and the master bedroom." Silence, a long, stunned silence. Then footsteps, fast, angry. Chloe stormed back into the dining room. Her face was a mask of fury. Ethan stood frozen, confusion warring with fear. "What is the meaning of this, Robert?" she shrieked. "Where do you think you're going?" Her voice was shrill, panicked. The control was slipping. "You agreed to the guest room," she insisted. "I agreed to nothing," I said, setting my cup down. The china clicked softly in the silent room. My voice was calm, steady. "You told me to give up my room or pack my things," I reminded her. "I chose the latter." "You can't just leave," Ethan stammered, finally finding his voice. "Dad, this is insane." "Where will you live?" Then the financial implications hit him. "We can't afford to pay for an apartment for you on top of everything else," he exclaimed. The selfishness was astounding. He wasn't worried about me. He was worried about the money. The realization dawned on Chloe's face. She thought I was leaving them with the burden of the house. The upkeep, the taxes. A slow, malicious smile spread across her face. She thought she had won. "Fine," she hissed. "Leave. Don't expect any help from us. You'll be begging to come back within a month," she added, her voice dripping with venom. They still thought I needed them. They still thought I was weak. It was time to shatter that illusion. I walked past them, towards the front door. The movers were already starting to carry out boxes from my study. I paused. I turned back to Ethan. I handed him my set of house keys. He took them instinctively. "The house is taken care of," I said. Then I delivered the blow. The one I had been saved. "But you might want to check the paperwork on that HELOC application," I said casually. "The $200,000 one." Ethan went pale, as white as a sheet. His hand trembled as he took the keys. "Mr. Henderson at the bank called," I continued. "They take forgery very seriously." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. "And so does Detective Miller. He should be stopping by later today." Ethan stumbled back, grabbing the doorframe for support. He looked like he was going to be sick. Chloe's smile vanished. Her face turned ashy. The word forgery hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. They knew they were caught. The panic in their eyes was exquisite. I didn't wait for a response. I walked out the door and down the driveway. The air felt clean, fresh. The morning sun felt warm on my face. The movers were already loading my desk. The beautiful mahogany desk that had been the center of my world. I didn't look back at the house. It was just wood and stone now. I crossed the street, the asphalt cool under the morning sun. I walked up the path to the Peterson place. Now my place. Mark was waiting on the porch, keys in hand. Satisfied grin on his face. "Closed yesterday afternoon," he said, shaking my hand. "Fastest deal in history. Welcome home, Robert." I took the keys. The metal felt solid, real. A new beginning. "How were the tenants across the street?" Mark asked, nodding towards my old house. "Distressed," I replied, allowing myself a small smile. The movers followed me across the street, carrying my belongings into my new home. From the porch, I could see Ethan and Chloe standing in the doorway of my old house, watching in stunned silence as the truck emptied. They hadn't understood. They thought I was retreating, defeated. They never realized I was simply repositioning, establishing a new command post. Right across the street. Life across the street was quiet. The old Victorian needed work, yes, but it was solid, peaceful, and entirely mine. I spent the first few weeks setting up my new office. I chose the large room on the second floor, the one with the bay window that looked directly out onto the street. Directly across from it was the master suite of my old home, my former prison. The view was excellent. The fallout for Ethan and Chloe was swift and brutal. I didn't have to do much. I simply stopped the flow of money. The first casualty was Ethan's career. George Vance called me a few days after the transfer. "Robert," George said, his voice laced with amusement, "your son is struggling. He demanded a corner office," George continued, "and an assistant. I told him he gets a cubicle and a phone. He has to earn the rest. Ethan wasn't built for hard work. He was built for entitlement." He lasted exactly 3 weeks. He couldn't handle the pressure. He couldn't close a deal. He quit. He was unemployed and unemployable. The next blow was the forgery investigation. I watched from my window as Detective Miller paid them a visit. Just as I had arranged, the police car pulled into the driveway. Chloe met the detective at the door. Her body language was defensive, hostile. Ethan hovered behind her, nervous, terrified. Mark handled the legalities. We didn't press charges. I didn't want the scandal. But the threat was enough. We made sure the bank knew. Mr. Henderson was very cooperative. Their credit was frozen. The Holic application was denied. The word fraud was attached to their names. They were radioactive. The upkeep on the large house, the utilities, the landscaping, the unexpected repairs. It was all falling on them. The container of love had become a financial black hole, a money pit, and they were drowning in the life they thought they deserved. I heard the shouting sometimes, late at night. The sound carried across the quiet street. Chloe's voice, sharp and accusing. Ethan's voice, weak and defensive. Their marriage collapsing under the weight of their greed. The Davises were caught in the crossfire. Their retirement paradise had become a war zone. Davis stopped complaining about the Wi-Fi. He started complaining about the grocery bills. I heard him complaining loudly one afternoon that the stair lift had broken down and Ethan couldn't afford to fix it. The irony was not lost on me. They moved out after a month. I saw them leave, suitcases packed, faces grim. I saw Ethan and Chloe less and less. The curtains were drawn most of the time. The house looked neglected, the lawn overgrown. They were prisoners now, trapped in the fortress they had stolen. And I was the silent observer, the witness to their self-destruction. Then came the morning I knew I had won. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation. It was a quiet moment of clarity. I was sitting at my new desk, the morning sun streaming in, reviewing contracts. My business was thriving. I was thriving. I looked up as I heard the curtains being thrown open across the street. It was Chloe. She stood in the window of what used to be my bedroom. Her face was drawn and tired. No makeup, no designer clothes, just a worn bathrobe. The arrogance was gone, replaced by despair. She looked out across the street and froze. We made eye contact. I realized this was the first time she had truly seen me in years. Not as an obstacle, not as a burden, not as an old man waiting to die, but as I was. Independent, powerful, and free. The man who built the empire, the man they tried to destroy. I slowly raised my coffee mug in a silent toast, a gesture of acknowledgement, a salute to the fallen enemy, and I gave her a small, polite wave. Chloe stared at me, her mouth opening and shut. The color drained from her face so rapidly, I thought she might actually faint. She realized then the magnitude of her mistake. She had underestimated the old man. She stumbled back from the window, letting the curtain fall back into place, hiding from the truth. I took a sip of my coffee. It was still warm. I never sought revenge. I simply refused to be erased. I had spent my life building security. When they tried to take it from me, I realized that true security isn't found in a house, or a room, or the approval of ungrateful children. It's found in knowing your own worth. A week later, a for sale sign appeared on the lawn across the street. They couldn't afford it anymore, they sold it at a loss. The market had dipped. Poetic justice. I watched them leave, a small moving truck this time. Not the large one I used. Ethan looked broken. Chloe looked angry. They didn't look at my house. They just left. I had lost a house, but I had gained my life back. And as I looked around my new home, filled with light and the promise of a peaceful future, I knew I had made the right trade. I picked up the photo of Sarah. We made it, love, I whispered. Sometimes the best way to win is simply to walk away and wave from the other side of the street. Thanks for listening. Please rate our story in the comments. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe. Your support means a lot, because your time matters.